Alcatraz over here gets 2 water changes a week, and today's the first water change of the week. I figured what better time than now to talk about why we do water changes, how to do water changes efficiently and more importantly without hurting your fish, and when to do water changes. Nobody likes doing water changes. Okay, well, I kind of like doing water changes, but I'm a freak. But for the most part, they're not an enjoyable thing for fish keepers to do. So why is it so important for us to keep up on them in the first place? At some level, we all kind of know why we do water changes in our aquariums. Because it's good for our fish, right? But what would happen if we didn't do them? There are like a million videos on the nitrogen cycle, and if you don't know what that is, then you need to. So go watch some good ones, because I ain't making one now. But I can give you the whole thing in a nutshell. Fish poop or organic things die, or you feed your fish too much. All that stuff will turn to ammonia, which is extremely toxic for your fish. Even just a little bit can kill them. Given the choice between being stuck with the Psycho Beast machine Cichlid like the Black Nasty, like I have, or being stuck in a tank with ammonia, every fish in your tank would pick the Black Nasty, even though he'd rip them apart in minutes. Ammonia sucks. You don't want any ammonia in your tank. None at all. The good news is there's bacteria that actually binges on ammonia, gets rid of it for you. Unfortunately, then that bacteria excretes it as nitrites, which also kill your fish. So that's not so good. But guess what? There's another type of bacteria that gets fat on nitrites. Problem solved. Except these little guys excrete nitrates, which, although less toxic than ammonia nitrite, still suck for the overall health of your fish. There are only a few ways to get rid of this. A heavily planted tank will do it. Nitrate is fertilizer for your plants. But a lot of us don't have planted tanks, so that's not an option. Then you can have anaerobic bacteria, which takes a while to cultivate, and again, most of us don't have that going on in our prison tanks either. So that leaves only one other thing, because there's no bacteria that's going to eat this up for you. The only other thing you can do is manually remove it, and that means removing the water and replacing it with clean water. You'll hear some people say that nitrates aren't actually a big deal, and water changes are for fools, but those guys can go fuck themselves, because first of all, they're wrong. Nitrates are bad for your fish, and second, they can just go fuck themselves. It's misinformation. Certain fish are less susceptible to toxic nitrates than others, but it's still not good for them, and when it gets to be too high, it'll take its toll. And it may not be right away. Some of these water condition problems we have in our tanks, like nitrates and pH, might not kill your fish right now, but it can shorten their lifespan, kind of like living with a smoker or eating too many cheeseburgers or watching too much Star Trek. Just kidding. You can't watch too much Star Trek. It's impossible. Live long and prosper. Replacing the old water with new water also replenishes lost minerals in the water, which are good for your fish and your plants. So that's why we do it. Plus, even though it's kind of a pain in the ass to do water changes, it kind of does make you feel good to be doing something for your fish. There's a sense of pride in making sure your fish are well taken care of. It's also a really good time to observe your fish and see how they're doing. Are they behaving normal-like? Do they have all their eyes and fins? Funny thing, last week I added some Geophagus redhead tapajos to San Quentin, my 10-foot long American cichlid tank. And there was already a Jurapari inmate in there, who, as I said in last week's video, suffers from being an ass. Well, he thinks the tapajos resemble him a little too closely for comfort, so he started doing some antagonizing on him. So if I was gone, I'd send a quick text to my wife just to do a checkup on those tapajos. My text would read,
"Do they still have their eyes?"
That'd be all I'd say. Sounds pretty grim, doesn't it? But it's so true, and all you cichlid keepers out there know exactly what I'm talking about. Gotta do an eye check every now and then. Even when you're checking your cichlids out every day, you're counting the eyes. 20 fish, let's see if I still have 40 eyes. Or if your tank is like Alcatraz, my African cichlid tank, where one is already missing an eye, you'd be hoping for 39 eyes. Anyway, if you don't want to do water changes, then you can just
subscribe or someone dies. Ding ding.
As I mentioned last week, this topic is probably the most controversial one you'll find anywhere among fish keepers. And that's, when do you do a water change? And it seems like it would be a pretty simple answer, but it can get really complicated and convoluted when you listen to all the opinions that you'll find other fish keepers saying. But really, it's not that hard. I'm kind of going out of sequence here, but it's my channel, so I can be as confusing as I want. So people really get excited about this one. They think they have the answer and everyone needs to do it just like they do, or they're stupid. Follow their recipe, which can change from twice per week to never. These people will die on whichever hill they've decided is the absolute truth. But really, there are no absolutes when we're talking about when to do water changes, because every tank is different, and fish are different. I already mentioned that the main reason we do water changes is to lower the nitrate level in the yard, because nitrates are toxic to the fish. You'll never get your nitrates to completely disappear though, so when do they become a problem? That'll help you know when you should change the water. Well, typically it's around the 40 parts per million mark. With most fish, you'll want to keep it below that, so if it gets to 40, do a water change. If you get above 40 parts per million, your fish aren't going to just all be tits up by morning. Like I said, it takes time. Of course, if you have cichlids, one of them could go more insane than usual and everyone could be dead by morning anyway, but that's off topic. So it's generally a good idea to keep it below 40 parts per million to help your fish remain healthy, and not just today, but years from now as well. But not all fish are created the same, so some, like discus cichlids, are more susceptible to things like nitrates. Do your research on the type of inmates you have, and that'll help you decide if you should keep those nitrates possibly even lower than 40 parts per million. Maybe you need to keep it below 20 parts per million. Just do what's right for your fish. We should always be doing what's right for our fish anyway. That includes choosing other compatible inmates, having the right decor, having non-expired meds on hand, good filtration, etc., stuff like that. And keeping those nitrates down is an important one. So how do you know how high your nitrates are in the first place? Well, they have test kits like the one I use, the API Master Test Kit. The link is in the video description. And it's the only one I use. You get some solutions to mix in a vial of tank water, and the color it turns will let you know approximately where your tank is at. The problem with this test kit is that sometimes the colors on the test chart are so close to each other that it's nearly impossible for me to tell the difference. I mean, just look at the difference between 40 parts per million and 80 parts per million. What the hell, right? They're practically identical. I try to keep it at least a bit below the 40 parts per million when I do a water change, just so I can see a little more orange in the solution, because otherwise I have no idea. Overall, it's a pretty good test kit though, and it's more accurate than the test strips you can buy. Another option I read about from a viewer's comment is a digital reader. I did some research and found some made by a company called Hannah, but all I could find were marine versions. I found some other ones, but they were like $800, which is maybe a little bit steep. I mean, we got cheeseburgers to buy. Maybe you know of a digital reader that you can recommend, so if you do, leave a comment. So test your water, and at first you may have to test it like every week to see if your tank needs a change. Eventually though, you'll get it down without having to do a check. You'll just have a feel for how often the nitrates get up there, and that's when you can establish a routine. A little off topic here, but if you remember last week I added a bunch of new inmates to San Quentin, and I wanted to let you know they're all doing great. These electric blue acara are really adding a nice touch of color to the tank, I think. Bub, the chanchita, is doing fine, and so is this red shoulder Severum, who seems to be at home the most out of all the new guys. He's often out front and center and likes to roam around the right side of the tank towards the middle. Almost all the new guys prefer the right side of the tank, probably because that's where Kevin and Sylvia aren't. But this guy's going to be a stunner when he grows up. I already have another Severum in here. It's the mouth-brooding Severum. So far they're fine coexisting with each other, but I didn't really expect there to be any problems anyway. Just had to share that with you. Okay, back to water changes. There are a lot of things that'll influence how quickly the nitrates get up there. Stocking level, the more fish you have will make the nitrates go up there more quickly, and the more they eat and poop will do it too. Cichlids are notorious for creating a lot of waste, so typically cichlid keepers are doing more water changes. How much you feed your fish has a lot to do with it too. Feed them more and they'll poop more, obviously. Look at Katie, by the way, my beautiful and feisty Nicaraguan cichlid. I just gave her the name Katie after a viewer by the same name. If you feed too much and there's food left over, it's going to rot and eventually cause the nitrates to go up. Anything that dies and stays in your tank will do it too. So take out those dead plant leaves or fish as soon as you can. Do gravel vacs occasionally to get the dead organic matter off the substrate. That's an easy one. You don't want anything sitting around in your tank that could be adding to the waste in there. If you have a heavily planted tank, then that can really help reduce the nitrates, which will minimize the number of water changes you need to do. They do the work for you. Like I said, there are a lot of factors influencing this. I have tanks that need a water change every 2 weeks, And like I told you, Alcatraz needs 2 per week. So when do you need to do a water change? Well, research your fish, test your water, and do it when you need to. Every tank is going to be different. When you first start out as a fish keeper, you're probably just using a siphon and a bucket. And that's fine at first, but eventually it's going to get pretty old, it's a waste of time, and it can take its toll on your body. There are better ways to do it, and one of the ways that most people swear by is pretty good, but I have a much better way to do water changes that I'm going to share with you. I'll be talking about how much water to change in just a little bit, but first, let's tackle this. One of the main reasons people skip doing water changes is because it sucks. It's hard, it's time consuming, and there are just so many more enjoyable things we could be doing. And the reason it sucks so hard is usually because of how you're doing it. Most new fish keepers start off with a siphon and a bucket. And that isn't really too bad a way to do it if you have a 10-gallon tank. I mean, that's what I do with my 20-gallon grow-out tanks. But even so, those buckets of water can get heavy. And if you're really weak, you might not even be able to lift it off the ground. Hopefully you have some strong family members or friends. If you're part of the bucket brigade and you have a 55-gallon tank, you gotta figure something else out because that's gonna suck big time. Well, that's what I'm here for. I just said that there's a better way that most fish keepers swear by, and that's the Python. It's basically still a siphon and hose, but in this case there's no bucket. You just create the siphon action and the other end is draining out wherever you decide to drain it. Then, after you're done draining, you hook the other end up to your faucet and it'll start filling the tank back up for you. No fuss, no muss. No buckets. Easy. If you're breaking your back with buckets, this is a huge upgrade, and you'll hate doing water changes less. But I've got an even better way for bigger tanks, like 55 gallons and up, I'd say. It's this. I use a Cichlid Ultra Zero submersible pump, which you can use a different pump if you like, but it's hooked up to a 1-inch inside diameter hose and it's freaky fast. So easy too. You just drop it in the tank, clamp the other end over a tote in the bathtub, and let her rip. This is a clip from my water change when I moved my cichlids from the 180 to make room for the black nasties, my video from last week. Takes about 6 minutes to drop it down 70%. That's quick, and then I just reverse it and stick the pump in the tote, which is constantly filling the water back up from the faucet. That's it. Takes about 15 minutes or less to fill it back up. It's slower than draining it because of the head pressure, water traveling up the hose instead of down. This is the way to go if you ask me. Work smarter, not harder, right? The affiliate links to the pump and hose are also in the video description. Alright, how much water should you be changing though? I used to watch a fish tuber on YouTube that did huge water changes, like 80%. So that's what I did for a long time, and it seemed to be fine. But then one day, I killed all my fish. Yeah, I forgot to put in dechlorinator, and they just dosed the aquifer with chlorine, so it was super strong. I only got the tank to about 60% full and noticed all my fish in the lower corner, some of them upside down. It was absolutely horrible, and I was stupid for not putting dechlorinator in, but it happens. I'm not going to get into all that, but I realized that if I'd done a smaller water change, the effects still would have been bad, but not as bad as they were. The chlorine would have been diluted by the water that was already in the tank. At least it wouldn't have been so devastating so quickly. Not only that, but any problems with the water will be exacerbated if you're replacing more of it all at once, obviously. Did you forget to check the water temp, and the water you're adding back is 10 degrees colder than the tank water? That'll have a much more dramatic effect on your fish if you're practically replacing all the water all at once. If you're doing a 25% water change and the water you're adding is 10 degrees colder, it's not going to drop the overall tank water temp nearly as much as it would if you were doing an 80% water change. Here's another one. My tap water pH is about 7.4 or 7.6. But once it's been sitting out, it goes up to about 8.4. I did a whole video on this in the upper right corner if you want to check that out. So pretty much all my tanks are sitting around 8.4. If I'm doing a huge water change, the fish are going to have to swim around in a much lower pH than they're used to. And big swings in the pH are really bad for your fish, just like nitrates. It might not kill them right now, but what if you do this every week? Is it going to take its toll on them and shorten their lifespans? I don't want to take the chance. So here's what I do. I do about a 50 to 60% water change max on any of my tanks, preferably even less than that. But I don't want to be doing water changes 3 or 4 times a week. So that's why I do 2 water changes on Alcatraz, because I know I need to do about an 80% water change once per week. But I want to play it safe and split that up, even though it means more work for me. It's all about the fish. I gotta do right by them because they're counting on me, and yours are counting on you too. I think doing smaller water changes more frequently is a much safer option for your fish. And I don't know if you have normal fish or nut job cichlids like I do, but either way, your fish are gonna appreciate all you do for them. I mean, they won't really because they're just fish, but you know what I mean. See you next time, fish nerds.